Just to inform you, it'll be a little bit different than it is most nights. We'll do a split lesson. I will do the first half, and then Brother Stone will come up and continue it for us. Ladies and gentlemen, we are the called out people. Romans 12:2, I'll read it for you real quickly. It says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we are the called out people. We as Christians are called out to go into the world and do God's will. But at the same time, we are also to not let it influence, like the verse said, we are not to conform to the world. We are not to let it mold us in the wrong ways. Tonight, for my part of the lesson, I will cover a couple of quick examples of what we are expected to do. If you'll please turn to Daniel chapter 3, we'll start there with the topic of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We start at verse 1, and I'll start reading. It says, "King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, whose weight was 60 cubits, and its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plains of Dura in the province of Babylon. The king Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the province to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the satraps and prefects and the governors and the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the province gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And the herald proclaimed aloud, 'You are commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And whosoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into the burning fiery furnace.' Therefore, as soon as all the people heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up." So far, we see a king. We see a king who is so set on this statue that he's made, this gigantic golden statue. He's so proud of his creation, and he wants everyone else to worship it. He wants everyone else, when the music has begun, he wants everyone else to bow down and to celebrate it. And anyone who does not listen to these rules that he has set up will die. But if we continue reading at verse 8, we see, "Therefore at a time certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, 'O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whosoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up.' Then Nebuchadnezzar, in a furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought, so they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, 'Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into the burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hand?' Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, 'O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your God or worship the golden image that you have set up.' The king gave these men one final chance to obey these rules that he set up. And he told them, he made himself clear, if they did not listen, he would kill them. But the men Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they looked at him and they told him, to suffice it, we do not care. Our God will save us from your hand. He will save us from certain death. And even if he didn't, we still will not worship your false god. And if we continue reading at verse 19, we see that Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression on his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated, and he ordered that some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace, because the king's order was urgent, and the furnace overheated. The flames of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and rose up in haste, and declared to his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? And they answered and said to the king, True, O king. And he answered and said, But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace, and he declared, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair on their head was not singed, their cloak was not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and set aside the king's commands, and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own. Therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks against anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. We went from a king who was willing to kill if no one worshipped his God, to a king who was praising the true God for his amazing power. He even states that no other God can save in this way. Like the topic is, we are the called out people, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were called out. Like it says, they were placed to be in charge of the area of Babylon. But even in the works that they did in the world, they were not molded, they were not influenced, they did not conform to the world. And we see that in the influence that those actions showed upon the others. Now, if you would turn to Daniel chapter 6, we will talk about the next topic of Daniel and the lion's den. Now, it is very similar in many ways. If you start at verse 1, we see, It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could not find no ground or complaint or any fault, because he was faithful and no error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, We shall not find any ground or complaint against this Daniel, unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, O King Darius, live forever. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps and the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whosoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the documents and injunction. The king has these workers. I looked at the definition, and pretty much what these satraps are just governors, other people that help the king, as it says. And he has these three higher ups, the ones that watch over the satraps, so that the king does not have to focus on that too. And one of them is Daniel. In fact, Daniel is the favorite, so to speak, of the kings because of his spirit. And he's faithful. But these other men don't like that. They're jealous. They do not like that there is someone who is favorited over them. So they decide they want to get him in trouble. And the only way that they can find to get him in trouble is to use God. If we continue reading, starting at verse 10, we see then when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open towards Jerusalem. He got down on his knee 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, This thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked. Then they answered and said before the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or in the injunction that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel, and he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, Oh, know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king established can be changed. Then the king commanded that, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, May your God, whom you serve, continually deliver you. The men tricked the king. The men finally got the king to sign this law that no one could make petition to any god except for the king of God, and they could make no other petition. But Daniel didn't care. He did not let the world influence him or the laws of the world. He did not let them change his faith. And one verse, if you really focus on it, it talks about how he goes into his room with windows facing Jerusalem open. He could have easily closed the windows and hid what he was doing so that he didn't get in trouble, but he didn't. And the men, they catch him, and they tell the king, they say, King Daniel is disobeying your law. And the king realizing what he has done, he regrets it, and he realizes that Daniel's in trouble. But even knowing what the law is, he wants to save him. And he spends all day trying to find a way, but the men tell him, in my own words, King, we've tricked you. King, you want to save him, but we've got you to sign this law, and we got you. You cannot save him now. And the king, realizing the situation he's in, there's no other way. And he calls Daniel to be thrown into the den. But with the final piece of hope he has, he tells Daniel he hopes that the God that Daniel serves will save him. And if we continue reading, starting at verse 17, And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Then at daybreak the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm. Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Daniel was called out. He was working in the world, but even in the world, he did not let the wrongdoing and the evil of man influence him in any way, shape, or form. The jealousy of the men did not change how he acted. He did not hide his faith in any way, shape, or form, but he continued on. And it says once more, he was found, no harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Daniel was saved because he had faith, because he trusted the Lord. in the same way that we can be saved if we trust in the Lord. As I finish my lesson up and I pass it on a stone, one question is, would we be like them? Even with all the wrongdoing of man and all the sin in the world, are we going to let that influence us? Or even what we face, are we going to continue to stay faithful and be the called out people that we are? Thank you.